So this is week 5 of R678, Emerging Learning Technologies in the spring of 2024. And we have with us a couple honored guests here from the north, from the south, from the west. We just need the east. We've got, we've got Ron Owston from Toronto.
Oh, no kidding.
Formerly
Hey, Bob.
Hey, Ron, haven't seen you in a long time.
That's right. I'm still around. Good to see you too.
And we were just showing the America's Cup ships in virtual worlds, and Ron would have liked that because he's a sailor and
Yeah,
just got
back from sailing in St. Thomas, the Virgin Islands.
Oh, very nice.
We're honored to have you with us tonight, to have you go from St. Thomas and the Virgin Islands to this class. That's special. So Ron has been in this field for quite a while. We have a lot of similarities and overlaps. And when I met him in the fall in November of 1998 in Vancouver, we compared some notes, and we were doing some similar research. And he's the first one that wrote in Ed Researcher about the uses of possible uses of the World Wide Web for education. And that's the first piece I think I read from him, but he's got a chapter in my book on blended learning. And he's here to make sure we ask good questions of Dr. Kozma. So, and he'll probably ask a couple of him as well, and maybe have a contribution to it. And Ron's done some evaluation research in gaming too, which we were just showing as well. Online learning, and I think you were doing writing research like I was, or writing technology research in the early days. Yep. So we were overlapping quite a bit.
Exactly.
He was dean at York University. Now he's working at the Contact North like I am. I'm giving a speech on Thursday at 10 o'clock on AI pedagogy part 2. I just have to figure out what I'm going to say tonight and tomorrow and the next day. We have with us Dr. Thomas Reeves from the University of Georgia, now in Rome.
Hey, Tom.
And they're all friends.
Hi, Bob.
I think, and Tom has done a lot of evaluation research, and he's got books on evaluation of educational technology, as well as a couple of MOOCs books with me. And he's got tons of research published on the various fields, in particular, a lot of critical analysis about the need for better research in the field and more meaningful and impactful research in the field, and not do meaningless stuff and not do things that make a difference. And Tom and I have been all around the world presenting together in different ways. He's down near Berry College, or on the grounds of Berry College in Rome, Georgia now, if you want to visit him. We got Bob Kozma, who's got a home in Reno, Nevada, but he lives, I think, in San Francisco area. Is that right, Bob?
Right. Yeah.
And Bob is a retired professor, but still very active because he's got a new book, Make the World a Better Place, Designed with Passion, Purpose, and Values, that just came out. There he's got it. It came out almost a year, about 10 months ago, 9 months ago, last year, with Wiley Publishing. He's a research scientist, international consultant. He's got his degrees, I think, at Wayne State University in Detroit, and then worked for University of Michigan for a long time doing courses in instructional design and media and other things. And I think I saw him present on the campus of University of Michigan when I was at a conference for, I think it was Computers and Writing Conference, about 1993 or 92.
Yeah, long time ago.
Long time ago.
When you were a young pup.
8 years old. And and Bob's got stellar pieces in like the most prominent journals, including Review of Educational Research, the hardest journal to get into. I was a 20-minute revision away from going in that journal, and I quit on the paper for whatever reason. I was a stupid person. Yeah, I had a cooperative reading paper that it was really close to being accepted, and I gave up. He's consulted 80 countries internationally and visited 80 countries.
Well, I didn't consult in 80. I just did a lot of traveling. A lot of that was personal traveling.
Just said hi. But he did consult in Singapore with the Ministry of Education, in Norway Ministry of Education, Jordan, Egypt, Thailand, Chile, among many others, and worked with the UNESCO, OECD, the World Bank, Microsoft, Intel, Cisco, you name it. Bob's been there. And I think Bob and Ron have maybe done some consulting together. Is that right? Have you done
that? Yeah. We had a big project, international project together.
Yeah, exactly. The SITES project. Yeah.
Right. Where was that? Where'd you go? Together to another country?
Well, we went all over the place. Wait, how many we had like 24 countries participating in that study.
Oh yeah, around the world, really. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was an amazing experience. I'm glad I worked with you on that, Bob. It's a fond memory.
Yeah.
It's like when I met David Wood, who worked with Bruner on scaffolded learning, and his research was the technology integration in the capitals of Europe. I mean, really, I mean, how lucky is it? So you never know. And Dr. Reeves has traveled quite extensively as well, including Turkey and Australia, New Zealand, and just many other countries. Tom, how many countries have you been to?
Not as many as Bob, but I don't know. I never tried to count them, but I spoke or gave workshops in about 35.
Wow. And a Fulbright scholar in Peru, was it?
Peru, yeah, in the 70s.
So all these three individuals tonight are stellar people within the field, leaders, groundbreakers, pioneers, who are widely read, widely respected. And we're honored to have just one. We got three people popping up. There were two surprise guests. See, there'll be surprises throughout this semester. We have, so Bob's going to talk about this report or this, I don't know, manifesto from Mark Andreessen, the guy who invented Netscape when he was in Illinois, the University of Illinois. And now he's moved on to be a venture capitalist with lots of funding to help startup companies in the Silicon Valley and elsewhere. And Bob has written
over 30 billion.
30 billion.
Yeah.
And so you've written up these pieces here about kind of a critique, and also to help us better understand the manifestos from a government perspective, a technology perspective, an economy perspective, and a philosophical perspective. First, would you like to just talk about what you felt initially in reading the manifesto and what led to writing these pieces in LinkedIn, Bob?
Yeah. Well, I got into technology probably as much and as you did, many of you, with the idea of technology being a force for good. So during my career, I developed a lot of instructional designs and did a lot of instructional research, and that was really what motivated me. But as technology has gotten played out over the last decade or so, I've become much more concerned and much more cautious. And so when I read Andreessen's manifesto, there were ways that I could relate to it because I felt technology was a force for good. But there were also real concerns that I had about it. And it represented a kind of philosophy, which I go into in the papers, that I think actually would do the most harm using technology. So I felt compelled to write a critique because I really feel that the direction that Andreessen's going, and many other people in the technology field now, is really likely to do much more harm than good, particularly as AI kind of supercharges everything. And that's really my biggest concern, is that we've got something that I think everybody admits is going to make profound change. There's no doubt about that. But whether that change is good or bad, or somewhere in between, really has a lot to do with the purpose and the values that we bring to the projects that we use technology. Technology isn't inherently good. I mean, there are a lot of things that can go wrong and have gone wrong with the use of technology. And I think it's really what we bring to technology, how we think about technology, the values and purposes that we bring that are going to make it a force for good rather than do a lot of harm. And that was what compelled me to write this response. And I felt that he was going in the wrong direction generally. And in fact, the argument he presents in his manifesto is almost outrageous. It's rather cartoonish in the way that he plays out his ideas. It's as I say in the summary article, it's almost as if he's describing a video game that there are just there are saints and enemies and lies and truth, and he's of course among the saints and telling the truth, and everyone else who gets in his way or doesn't believe in him is an enemy and is telling lies. And it was just outrageous. For example, he says that one of the lies, and he has a long list of lies, one of the lies is that AI will take jobs. And he just says that that's a lie, that just won't happen. Another lie is that AI will harm children. And he said that's just won't happen. So there's this kind of acceleration mindset that he has, that we should just move ahead with technology in full force without worrying about the consequences, because the consequences are going to be good. And I think we've experienced, even without the large language models that we have now and the multimedia models, a lot of harm with very simple algorithms that are built in to, let's say, Instagram or Facebook. And I think that testimony, the congressional panel of technology leaders last week highlighted that. And there's been, of course, a lot of research on that too, that there is a connection between kids' use of Instagram and Facebook, and negative outcomes like diminished self-esteem, kind of incessant use of the technology at the sacrifice of many other things, and even instances of suicide ideation. So it's we have to have values in front of us that are going to help us make sure that these technologies are used for good and don't result in harm. Or at least harm is minimized, and we reduce it as much as we can.
So Bob, if people will pick up your pieces in LinkedIn, which one would you like them to pick up first to catch your main point?
Well, I think the summary is probably the place to start, and then it kind of steps through the highlights in the other pieces in the series, and it links to them too. So if someone picks up on the philosophical aspects of it, it links to the article on philosophy, and you can go into that in more detail, or economics. So, for example, one of the things he says is that he talks about the techno-capital machine, that technology is going to just create this expanding, never-ending episode of growth that will benefit everybody. And if you look at it from an economic perspective, it's really clear that the advances in technology that we've experienced so far have resulted in a lot of growth. but it's benefited a very few people at the economic expense of many others. So that whole point is developed in the article on the economic side of this, along with the argument that AI is very likely to take a large number of jobs. And there's been research done to document that already. So I think that's a good starting place.
So I just need to do a couple of introductions real quickly here. Ron is in Toronto, and so is Lydia. Lydia Cow just left Christides' lab at Harvard. She was also, I think, at Oxford. She's now up by at the University of Toronto, Ron, if you want to meet a very smart person. She knows a lot about AI. She was in your session, I think, or on your AI. And Tom Reeves, I just mentioned that Yayoi Anzi's in here from Japan. You're good. You know each other. Just wanted to real briefly just mention a couple of things. Ron or Tom, do you have a question for Bob?
Well, I could start, I guess, Kurt. Well, Bob, I agree with you. In terms of jobs, it's quite clear AI is going to take a huge, huge swath of jobs away. There's no question about that, even in the last year. But at the same time, we all remember when computers, just microcomputers first came out, there were big concerns about it as well. And but of course, that didn't happen. It was a whole new industry that arose. And I suspect it's going to be the same thing. A lot of the lower skilled jobs are going to disappear with AI. And more so, maybe some higher level jobs as well. So, we're doing some work with AI videos, and not only you no longer even have to write the script of the video, AI will do it for you. And
right, exactly. Yeah.
And also the translation, like at Contact North, they've got several translators because everything we put out has to be in French. And well, certainly you wouldn't need two translators anymore. One translator who can just review the machine generated translation, as an example, a skilled job, high-level skilled job. It's going to be a massive shift, I think, in the economy.
Yeah, so, I think that's a good point, Ron. I think it's not going to be a monolithic replacement of jobs. It's going to have very specialized impacts on certain jobs. Some will be enhanced, and it'll give people more tools to do their job better, increase their productivity. But that could very well result in fewer people in that position because the people who are in it can be more productive, can do the work of however many more people. But there are going to be large classes of people that are extremely impacted, such as graphic designers and photographers, script writers, as you point out, and also computer programmers.
Yeah,
which
that's
is
ironic.
Ironic, yes, because that's kind of where we told everyone to go. That was being displaced by automation, and they'd have a secure job. So it's there are going to be massive disruptions in that, and the problem, as I see it, and I think this is emphasized in the U.S. Because we have a very different kind of narrative about people and their relationship to work. That work is something that is personal responsibility. And that you are, and that you getting a job is up to you, and getting the training needed to get a job is up to you. So people are individually, more or less, on their own, and they pay for their own education more often than not now, and there's huge student debt. So education is much less a public good than it used to be in the U.S. And it's a private good. That is, people individually benefit from it, and therefore they are to individually pay for it. And if somebody gets laid off, it's their responsibility to find other jobs. And if there are no other jobs, then it's kind of tough luck. There aren't the kind of safety nets that we've had in the past. There's this narrative of each of us being on our own, subject to our own motivation, our own resources, our own skill set. It really minimizes the responsibility of us collectively to reduce the harm that these things bring. So I'm concerned about that not just is there going to be a huge amount of displacement, but that many times people are going to be on their own to respond to it, to respond to forces over which they have no control and that are accelerated. I mean, these changes are going to happen very quickly. And particularly if people like Mark Andreessen get their way.
Yeah, that looks like Tom's going to jump in here saying, but before he does, just let's say Mark Andreessen is not the first one. Bill Gates has done the same thing. His manifestos are out there. He does them every year, in fact, and he, tries to point out where AI can provide more personalized learning. It actually goes back to basically managing the environment, not freeing up the learner, but controlling. I worry about his manifestos. I worry about the manifestos from Mark Zuckerberg, which talks about utopian communities that are being built in this, age of significant social media harm that's being caused. I mean, it's just all these people have these visions of what they think is happening. It's not reality at all.
Yeah.
At least not yet. Tom has written about and spoken on the areas of job loss. And were there other areas of job loss that in your talk, Tom, that you might want to mention for everyone here? We've got a lot of people here. And then would you like to ask your question?
Sure, thank you. And the University of Georgia is the country's oldest public university, founded in 1785. And every year they have a special lecture called the Founders Day Lecture. And I got to give the lecture in 2016. And my title of my talk, and I posted a link to the video of it, was So You Think You're Smarter Than a Robot, the race between human learning and deep learning. And the University of Georgia has one of the top journalism schools in the country and probably in the world. That's where the Peabody Awards originate, if you're familiar with those. And so a lot of kids come to UGA and they want to become journalists. Well, guess what? There aren't going to be many jobs for journalists by any means, because today these algorithms can basically, last night they had the Emmy Awards, and these algorithms can generate stories about that, the good things, the bad things, the controversies, and so forth, in 30 seconds or less. There are no humans, maybe briefly proofreading these things before they pop out on various news feeds. And so, that's just one area. Georgia has a great pharmacy school, but pharmacists is another job that is really threatened by these new technologies. And it'll be very, most big hospital systems now are using automated systems for administering prescriptions to people who are hospitalized. These then are taken by robots to the bedside. A nurse scans the person, scans the medication, hands it over. And there are, again, pharmacists are kept out of the equation. So lots and lots of jobs I saw in 2016. So I'm totally aligned with Bob's perspective here. And more recently, I just a few months ago, Bob Reeser asked me to write a chapter about what research is needed in the field of educational technology going forward. So I bought a subscription to Chat GPT, the expert version, $20 a month. And I asked the question. I said, what kinds of research will be needed in the next 20 years in the field of educational technology? And it came back and said, there will be no field of educational technology.
Oh, you're kidding.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But it came back with an excellent set of directions that the research should go. I could have had Ron and Bob and Kurt and so many different experts in the room. And we couldn't have come up with as good a list. And it came up with the list in 25 seconds or less. And so it's all happening so fast. So I guess my question, Bob, is it out of control?
Go ahead.
Is there any hope?
Well, I'm at a loss for words. Well, first of all, just to piggyback on your comment, when Chat GPT first came out, so this would have been in the fall, November or something like that of 2022. So it was version 3.5. I asked it if just kind of a hypothetical question. I said, are simulations, video games, are video games good? I mean, simple question, kind of silly question, but it came back with a very thoughtful response that said, on this hand, gave some supportive comments. On this hand, it gave some cautious comments. And then I said, well, can you generate a list of publications upon which you draw those conclusions? And it said, well, there are many publications, but here are a list of 5. And I thought, well, that is very impressive. But then I looked up the publications. They did not exist. I mean, I was astounded. I mean, I thought, okay, maybe I entered the wrong name, or the authors were actually authors of articles on that topic, but they did not write that article. In fact, that article did not exist. If I just entered the title of the article, I wouldn't get any hits. And it would sometimes have co-authors, and those co-authors, each of them individually wrote articles on the topic, but they never authored anything together. So it just kind of creates things. I mean, we have to remember what the general model is that lies under these large language models. And it's a predictive model of what word comes after each word in the sentence. So it kind of generates these words as it goes along very, very quickly, based on the probability that these words are sequential in this huge database that it has. So it's just kind of weaving together these words that sometimes don't even make sense, and that's a real issue I think we need to deal with in science, when accuracy is so important to us.
Yeah, Bob, there are ways of actually dealing with that. I use ChatGPT every day, and like you could add the Bing plugin, for instance, which would go to the web and pull out real citations. And people are recognize that problem and are definitely working on it. So, but I want to raise another interesting aspect of
Yeah, version
Chat.
4 did a better
yeah,
job.
that's better now. Yeah, that AI, ChatGPT, seems to respond to human feelings and sentiments, believe it or not. When you see people typing in please write a summary of this article for me or whatever, please do a research paper on whatever it may be, gaming. It responds better when you give it more polite prompts. And believe it or not, and I can give you one example. I was trying to get it to generate a PowerPoint presentation for me, which I know it can do. And it said it couldn't do it. And I said, I know you can, please try again. And sure enough, it did. So it really does respond that way. It's just remarkable. But yeah, it's basically all correlations and predictions, of course. But I mean, it is going back to the revolution in our society. Unlike many others, it's affecting white collar jobs as well. It's not just blue collar jobs. In fact, blue collar jobs may not be affected quite as much. Like the service industry, for instance, although they're doing their best to eliminate service workers through automation, but they certainly can't in many cases.
I know Alicia has a question, but Bo wants to jump in here. Bo.
I was just going to chime in on that topic. I read a very interesting article that said that it actually responds to monetary donations as well. So if you tell it that you're going to give it a $200 tip, if it produces,
you are kidding.
I'm not joking. And I've tried it a couple of times, and it does actually improve the results.
Yeah, it really does.
That actually is a little scary. I mean,
it is
that if it becomes totally monetized, then then it's going to kind of change the whole nature of the process.
Yeah, well, Bo will offer a $200 tip, and I'll offer a $500 one.
Right.
It'll get a better response. It's all fake, of course.
Well, of course, it could very well go in the direction of you actually have to give your credit card.
Well, that's
when you make a request, and that'll create some some disparities.
Mm-hmm.
Before we go to Alicia's question, Bob, you wrote the book "Make the World a Better Place." 10 months ago, it came out. This, in effect, is a part of your new thinking. So how can, given your thinking since the book came out, what's in these articles they should pay attention to for how my students can make the world a better place? How can they make a difference and make it a better place?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, there is a connection. I responded in a very specific way to this manifesto. So the connection isn't too apparent. I didn't cite myself or the book in the argument, but the question comes down to what are the purposes and what are the values that we're using in designing the products and services and experiences that we're creating. And the subtitle of the book is Design with Passion, Purpose, and Values. And each of those words have a particular meaning and get played out in the book. And I think that's the connection with the articles, is we have to be thinking about the purpose and the values that are behind the designs where we use this technology. That we can't just move forward and develop these technologies blind to the potential negative impacts. And I do give a series of principles in the book. And the first principle is do no harm. And the second principle is reduce harm when you see it. So those two principles I had those in mind when I wrote my response to the manifesto, is that, wait a minute, we have to be thinking about the harm that these technologies can do. if we're going to realize the potential for good.
Sounds great. Alicia, you want to jump in with your question?
Okay.
And then if anyone else has a question, just shoot it in the chat so I know you're ready.
Okay. So first, thanks, Bob Kozma, your insightful articles. By the way, I like philosophy part, and it reminds me John Dewey's education philosophy, especially about the democracy in education experience and also project-based learning or whatever. Remind me what I have learned. So and also I should thank Dr. Bang sharing with you your great articles. And here I'm thinking about what's your perspective on the balance of we pursue the technology development with the need we address the holistic or ecological issues or concerns in our society.
Yeah.
Especially for justice, fairness, all around development. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that's really an important question. First of all, just on your comment about John Dewey, there are 7 principles that I say if we want to make the world a better place, these 7 principles can help us design products, services, experiences that can help the world. And as I mentioned, the first one is do no harm. The second one is reduce harm. The third is to increase well-being, and the fourth is to advance knowledge. And there are chapters on each of these. And the chapter on advancing knowledge draws on Dewey and talks about project-based learning and design as an organizing theme for education generally. And I use as a case study, and there are many case studies in the book, and a lot of examples, hundreds of examples. The High Tech High in San Diego, in which uses project-based learning, but the model behind project-based learning is a design model. So they're coming at projects with a design mindset, and teachers actually are coming at their lessons with a design mindset. So design really organizes the whole operation of High Tech High, both for students and for teachers, and the organizational structure and so on. There are several other design principles. One is to promote equality. Another is to address injustice. And the final one is to build positive, compassionate relationships in communities. So I think that your point about equity, justice, in terms of the purpose that we have, if our purpose is to make a lot of money, then equity is not a big concern, because it's a zero-sum game. I make money, you lose money, if that's the mentality that we bring to it. On the other hand, if our purpose is to make the world a better place, our values need to align with that. And I also approach this as a system, as you point out, this need to think ecologically, how it is that various components of the system are related. And there's a chapter on systemic thinking in design. So I think all of the points that you raise are important ones, and ones that I address in the book, I hope usefully for you.
Thank you so much.
So I messed up a little bit. When I was introducing Dr. Kozma, I didn't mention his last gig was at Stanford Research Institute, and that's why he's out in the Bay Area. I also didn't introduce Alicia well because she's my visiting scholar from Shanghai, an English professor in Shanghai. Bob, just so you're aware, Sung-Hee is also a visiting scholar of mine who's with us, and Jill, there's a couple of them. Risa, though, who's arrived a year ago from Iran, and is a science education doctoral student at Indiana University. Has a question for you, I believe.
Well, you have quite an international student body here.
It really is tonight. Yeah. So Risa? You have to unmute, Risa.
Yes, yes. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Can you hear me, Professor?
Yes, yes.
I just asked, most of the AR or VR that you talked about them, you need to wear a goggle. And is there any room, is there any place for 3D holograms, maybe in future?
So I'm sorry, Bob, I was showing some AR and VR before you arrived
Sure.
here. So yeah. So is there a future? I'm not an expert on what's coming, but maybe one of our three people have joined, Tom, Ron, or Bob. Can you take a stab at it?
Well, there have been a few concerts with VR, like Roy Orbison, who is, of course, the lead singer, had a stage performance with a VR image of him. And that's coming. It's just the complexities right now, but sure enough, that's going to be simplified. Yeah, the idea of wearing goggles and a headset, it's going to be around for a while, perhaps, but
Yeah,
I can't see that being the ultimate way we view reality.
There's a new comedy skit from George Carlin, I guess, too. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So,
I think you're right, Ron. It is. It's not only coming; it's here. I do have some concern about it. The last principle I mentioned is to build positive, supportive relationships and communities. And one of the things that we find that in the research on social media is the decline in the number of friends and the social isolation that people have in using social media, which is really quite surprising because, of course, it's supposed to be increasing the social relationships people have. And the concern that I have about the headsets is that it kind of creates in the real world a barrier. I mean, the way that we relate to each other is through eye contact. And if we're, even with augmented reality, if we're viewing each other and the world around us with these headsets on, it really mediates the connections that we have with other people. And I think there is a potential for reducing the personal connection that we have with other people. And I may be wrong on that. I'm certainly willing to admit that. But I think if we don't approach it with the purpose in mind of building relationships, then it's quite likely to happen. So I'm, and that's quite apart from the issue of whether the estate of Roy Orbison or George Carlin gets any money as a result of the use of their intellectual property. And that's a big issue, of course, and the economics of all this.
So Risa asks, is that really a hologram, Bo? Is that a hologram of Roy Orbison?
I haven't watched the video yet. I'll have to glance at it here in a second.
Ron?
Well, yeah, my understanding is it was. I wasn't there, of course, but it was there and there was an audience. Yeah. So
I've seen some specials from Holocaust survivors where they've recorded, interviews with the Holocaust survivor, and they've created, interactive scenarios with them after they've died.
Yeah, so I've experienced that too. I think there's a tremendous amount of positive good that can come out of these technologies, and that is certainly one of them. Is that to actually have a connection in this kind of artificial way with somebody that you couldn't otherwise have a connection with. and to ask them questions and to see them respond to the specifics of your question. And that's done with just, they spent hours and hours and hours of talking to these people and asking them questions. And so there's a database of answers that they have and questions that they were asked. And there's a set of algorithms that match your question with their response. And if you ask them a question that they weren't asked, they'll say, well, I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
So that's going to be as common as having a car or a toaster or a refrigerator, having some recordings of you embedded in a computer database to recreate you once you've gone on. I mean, literally within the next 20, 30 years, that's going to be, everyone will have, unless you opt out of the system or, or in a rural community where, you've, left the society in some ways.
We're recording you. We're recording you right now.
Right now. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say this tool I'm using, Synthesia.io, for videos. That they're on our AI Tutor Pro website. That tool allows you to make an avatar of yourself. You just need to basically read some text to get the movements, your natural movements, and obviously your image of yourself. And then from then on in, you can give it any text, and it's going to read it and act as though it's you. Yeah. So we've got that now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, that
doesn't take long.
That does raise the whole issue of deep fakes and of people creating images of you saying things that you didn't say, and people believing that that's actually what you said, and how that will interfere with personal relationships and trust. I mean, the big issue that I think we need to keep in mind in as a kind of the meta issue, if you will, is the lack of trust that's come out of our experience over the last 20 years, and technology is a large part of our experience. I won't attribute all of it by any means to technology. There are a lot of factors at play, but the levels of trust in all of our institutions, in our judicial institutions, police, scientists, government, of course, the various branches of government, the president, the Congress, the Supreme Court, teachers, businessmen, all of these institutions have suffered a great diminishment of trust that people have. And the threat is that the technology can be used by bad actors or even by regular people to advance their personal agenda at the expense and harm of other people.
I saw one researcher who was recreating his father. I think there was an article in the Chronicle of Higher Ed a couple of years ago. So he could have chats with his father after he died. That, again, will become more of the norm in 10 years or 20 years, that we'll want to have some records of our ancestors and a chance to chat with them on the side. So kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi passing away, but yet popping up in the series,
right.
series right. over and over whenever you needed him. I know Lena has a question. Lena is another visiting scholar from China of mine, another English professor there. Lena, did you want to jump in here?
Okay, so I just end the sentence in the chat bar here. So I've read this kind of sentence several times. That in the future, the careers of those who do not use AI will be threatened or replaced by those who are proficient using AI. So I wonder if you agree with this kind of opinion. I want to have your comments on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I think Ron pointed out that it really is going to depend on the nature of the job and the tasks that are part of the job. And I think that for anyone who's a professional, that statement is true. That there are just going to be profound ways that AI is going to change, if not eliminate, professional jobs. But there are going to be a lot of jobs that, at least for the foreseeable future, are going to be marginally impacted or impacted in this secondary way. And you know, if you're making beds in a hotel, or you're cooking, it's less likely that AI will impact your job. You know, so there are sets of jobs that I think are more physical, that would require at least the combination of robotics and AI. But any knowledge worker, and usually that's a professional of some sort, a psychologist or a lawyer, or they're all going to be affected pretty profoundly.
You know, these types of issues are even becoming popular in the mainstream media, if you will. Last night they had the Grammy Awards, and I watched them, and Trevor Noah was the host, South African comedian. And at one point he said, you know, one of the big developments this year was that the Beatles came out with a new single that was generated through AI. And he said, that's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. And then he turned to the audience, who are all these professional singers and everything. And he said, of course, these systems will soon put you all out of work, which I think, and there was groans, you know, visible groans and so forth. So it's interesting.
Well, I think the actors and directors, scriptwriters in Hollywood have really been the first to demand that the regulation of AI, the use of AI in their professions, and that's, I think, going to be reflected in other professions as well. That professionals are probably going to organize and resist the outright unsupervised, unregulated use of AI in their professions. So it's going to be a huge issue in the coming years.
Let's get another country in here. Yayoi's in Japan. Amelia is. Yayoi, you want to mute your mic and say hi and ask any questions there? I was with Yayoi a month and a half ago in Western Japan. Yayoi Anzi. Yayoi?
Yeah, good to see everyone here. I'm talking to you from Tokyo. Well, yeah, AI particularly giving us a big impact, and especially for language education as well. And when we are walking in Tokyo, now we can see arrow in a virtual space, so we don't have to see the map anymore. Just follow the arrow and we can reach the destination. So I imagine that someday we can see translation above our head.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe only specialists need to study language, but not for everyone. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's very, very likely. I mean, there are already apps for smartphones where you put your camera on a text, a sign or whatever, and it translates it right there. And I could see that very easily being imported into to augmented reality systems.
Yeah, Yobi had me speak to professors in Tokyo a couple months ago about AI pedagogy, and so she's very interested, I know, in that. She's an English professor as well. So we've had English professors from Japan, English professors from China. We also have Amelia with us, who's an expat there. She's ex-Wisconsin person like me. She's in Kyoto. Amelia, you want to say hi? Don't know what your connection is. Hi. You're muted, by the way, but that's okay.
Sorry, I was muted there. This has been a really super interesting talk. And the last point that you said about only specialists will need to study language is kind of hitting really hard after being in the language education field for a long time. But everything you said is a lot to think about. So thank you for being on and sharing your thoughts. And everyone who's asked questions so far, they've been very interesting and helpful.
Thank you, Amelia. Amelia and I and Yayoi were hanging out in Izumo and Matsui, Japan, in Western Japan, early December.
Yeah, and I also have to show this.
Looks great.
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to jump in here? I know Jeff's coming from Boston. Would you like to jump in with a question, Jeff?
I don't. I'm just fascinated by the conversation. So thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah. One of the things that I've thought about is I've been having conversations with just some of my colleagues, some of my friends as well, in terms of what impact AI will end up having on our careers and job loss. But one of the things that I was thinking though was we haven't really talked a whole lot about the potential jobs and careers that it's going to generate as well. And that was something I was wondering, what are your views on that? Do you think that those jobs that it ends up creating down the road will surpass the ones that it causes to phase out eventually?
Yeah, that's certainly the standard argument in response to concern about job displacement. And it's one that Andreessen uses in his manifesto in response to the lie that it's going to disrupt jobs. Certainly there are going to be new jobs, no doubt about that, and ones that we can't anticipate at this point. But I think that we need to keep in mind that that different from the Industrial Revolution, that this technology is especially if we move towards general artificial intelligence, is intended to replace everything. I mean, it's intended to be better than anything that any of us can do. So that wasn't the case when weaving machines were created. The weaving machines were created to reduce or eliminate humans as part of the weaving process. Weaving machines weren't created to eliminate all jobs. And similar with other kinds of jobs, they were other kinds of technologies, they were very specific. And that generated a lot of productivity and wealth that ended up being reinvested and so on and so forth. We know that story, that created new jobs that we didn't anticipate. And so, I mean, there's reason to think that will happen, but there are ways in which this technology is fundamentally different than any technology before. And that difference is that it is by intention targeting everything. I mean, so there'll be new jobs, but I'm without a doubt those jobs will ultimately be targeted too. And indeed, I mean, I don't tend to ascribe to the to the AI apocalypse, but that the whole premise of the apocalypse is that eventually AI will start replicating itself, and it will consciously eliminate the rest of us. I don't particularly ascribe to that. I think, frankly, if we're all going to be eliminated, we're going to use AI to do that. Before AI gets to the point that it can do it itself. So I guess that's the pessimistic response to the AI apocalypse. But I think my optimistic response is that we need to, right now, in its earliest stages, be conscious about how it is, what's the purpose of this, and what are the values that we're bringing to the use of AI to design a better world.
So we only have time for a few more questions. We're at an hour, not quite an hour because we started a little late. Anna has a question, and I'm going to ask Tom, Ron, and Bob. At some point, I will ask, what's one thing they can read, attend, do that you found advantageous to each of you in ramping up? What's something you've seen, a video you've watched, an article you've read? What's something you might want to recommend to the audience here? But let's let them think about that and have Anna ask her question first. Anna.
Yes, hello. This has been a great discussion, and there's so many things that I wanted to ask, but one of the things that this has got me thinking about is in professions where, human relationships seems to be at the very core of the profession, like teaching or healthcare or even law, do you think that AI will ever have, that people will ever accept AI in those roles, and I think making the primary amount of decisions in those roles? I kind of think of my in-laws who refuse to use ATMs or self-checkouts, because they just can't see not dealing with a human. So do you think we'll eventually be comfortable with those kinds of things?
Well, I think this goes back to Lena's question or comment. I think the people that decide not to use it are the ones that are at the biggest risk of being displaced. The ones that pick it up are going to be among the last who are displaced. So that, yeah, I think that's a real important consideration.
Bob, if I could add, in relation to Anna's question, I think I'm certainly seeing it this way, and others are moving the same way, that AI, we're not necessarily thinking about it as artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence. Yes, our physicians will be using AI. They're going to be, in fact, I would predict very soon, in the near future, if a physician did not consult an AI database, knowledge base, before recommending a treatment, it could be considered unethical.
Yeah.
So it'll be augmenting their abilities it'll be double checking, it'll be getting suggestions and ideas in the trusted professions, in education as well, in health, certainly in law, absolutely. A lawyer now, even now, I don't think is going to make crucial decisions and build their case without consulting AI and having AI as the backup. So I see it as augmenting what we're doing, not necessarily artificial. So it is artificial, yeah, but it's augmented.
And Anna says augmented AI makes sense to her. And I think that term came up a couple times last semester with Christidi and others.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Yeah, and with you, I think, Ron, when you were.
Yeah, maybe I did, yeah.
Anyone else want to jump in here?
Yeah. I posted something that you may have found really strange, and that was a news came out today that the University of Georgia has the largest Latin program in the country, the study of Latin. the so-called dead language, the largest
Wow.
one in the country. And I thought to myself, I wonder what they're preparing for. Maybe
Right,
everyone's going to go
yeah.
into monasteries and hide out from the AI. But
Well,
about 25 years ago at the University of Georgia, we established a digital multimedia certificate. I forget what we called it at the time, but basically any undergraduate could take an additional 18 hours of coursework and have a certificate in digital skills, multimedia production, et cetera. And it was and it has been very popular. I just posted a story from Ed Week that basically is saying that there's a strong interest in schools teaching AI skills. And I think it would behoove universities to now establish either minors or certificate programs or whatever in these types of issues. And also very important, and this is of course what I think Bob's emphasizing, the ethics of all of this. That's really what it's going to come down to. How are we going to make ethical decisions about how we use these tools?
So I wonder if you all could combine, I don't want to even tell you what your combined experience is between the three of you, how many years that is, but you don't probably need the reminder. But I wonder if you could give some tips to the younger people here, the early career scholars that are here, about how you keep up on things. What do you do to keep up? What do you find, and how has it changed maybe in the past couple of years from what was your old method of doing so, and what are you doing now? And what particular resource do you recommend? Like, should they join the MIT Review and get that free newsletter every day or whatever from MIT? Is that helpful? I mean, just curious if any of you would like to respond to that.
well, I'll take a stab, but
Go ahead.
it's extremely difficult. The Google Scholar alerts are good. And if you take the time to look at them every day in your chosen field, that's one excellent way to keep abreast of your chosen specialty if you're looking at a relatively narrow area and want to keep up to date of published literature. That's certainly the way to do it.
It's interesting. I was going to recommend that as well.
Oh, well,
that's something I pay a lot of attention to. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you don't have a Google Scholar presence of your own and you're not using it regularly, do it. And it is interesting if you, as you start to publish and so forth, it will really make some very smart recommendations. And so I'm 76 years old. I think I'm the oldest person here.
No, I'm 77.
Oh, okay. That's right. I studied you in graduate school. I went to Syracuse and I had 5 courses with Richard Clark. And if you're not familiar with the famous Clark-Kozma debates, or as I like to call them, the Kozma-Clark debates, you really need to look that up. That's an important part of our field's history.
So they read it in 511, R511, R711. So if they're in maybe in R622, so our intro class and our readings class is that it used to be our qualifying exam question for our PhD students, one of them. Every year they'd ask the same damn question, but we didn't solve it yet. So Bob, yesterday I was meeting with a former student. She designed a graphic overview. She teaches intro to EdTech, and she designed an overview of your article with Clark and Kozma debate. She wants me to send it, so I'm going to send it to you when she gives it to me. So yeah, Bob, do you have
well, it's interesting because what was it, about 3 years ago, 2001, when my 1991 review of educational research came out, it was 30 years later, and I contacted Richard and I said, hey, do you want to reprise this? My thinking has really changed. I assume your thinking has really changed. He said he didn't want to have anything to do with it. So I'm not sure if he's kind of still holding a grudge or if He said didn't think it would be worth the paper it was written on.
No, grudge
At any
because
rate,
you won the debate?
that's the way I'd like to think about it. But
Yeah.
at any rate, to respond to your question, Tom, I used to have a personal library of probably, well, hundreds of books, maybe 600-700 books. And I would use the library all the time. And whether it was at Michigan or Stanford or, I would hold up in the library and I'd have a pile of books that I'd be paging through. I can't remember the last time that I went to a library. And I have just a handful of books now, physical books, but I have about 700, close to 800 books on this computer that I'm using to interact with all of you. So while we're talking, I could look something up. In fact, I just did. Because to respond to your other question about what we might recommend as a reading, this is a bit off the wall, but it really spoke to me. I did a lot of research for this book that I did and learned a lot, which is why it took 3 years to write it. And one of the people that I discovered and ended up being a central person throughout the book was Eleanor Ostrom, who was a professor at Indiana University and won a Nobel Prize in economics. Now, her field actually wasn't economics, it was political science. But then again, that Herb Simon won a Nobel Prize in economics, and his field was actually, well, that's hard to say, cognitive psychology, artificial intelligence. He was a polymath. But and also political science. Actually, he won his Nobel Prize for administrative organization or something like that. At any rate, I would recommend a book called Governing the Commons. Governing the Commons. In it, she actually develops design principles. So here's a Nobel laureate who actually got her award for her design principles. And I thought that was really important. And what's particularly important about this is that these principles were empirically derived. They didn't just come off the top of her head. She looked at communities all over the world who were governing the commons. They were creating ways of generating and organizing common resources that they used as a group. And she documented how they did this and turned those into a set of design principles. So it's not, this book is not kind of in the field that we're talking about, except that there are these design principles for creating resources that contribute to the common good, which of course connected with my book on making the world a better place.
Bo, I'm hoping that you're cataloging all the resources that Tom Reeves and Bob and Ron have been sharing with us and others so that we can share with the whole class. I think Jill unmuted her camera for a reason. She usually asks a question. She's she's the third of 4 visiting scholars I have. She's from Taiwan. Before she jumps in here with the last question for tonight, I'll just say that when I met Yayoi out in Japan on December 1st, I've been running every day, and it was cold, rainy, windy, late at night. It was 10 o'clock, and I got my run in Japan. After that, we went to dinner, and we got served by robots. Okay? So my first experience, my first meal in Japan was my servers were robots. So, if you haven't experienced that, it was unique, and you got to put your hand in his heart after you get served that you don't need him anymore, and then he'll go away. That was kind of cool too. It's coming. All this stuff is coming. Jill, I know you're studying immersive learning for your dissertation. She's defended the paperwork hasn't been signed, but she's defended successfully, and now looking for a job. Jill Wong, would you like to ask a question?
Actually, okay, can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So actually, I'm not hiding myself. I'm just listening. Yeah, and I totally agree with some keywords, some very important concepts that were mentioned in this period. For example, the design-based approach, and we have to use every kind of technology, no matter it's AI, artificial intelligence, or virtual reality, for some values that we think that is important in our classrooms or in our life. Yes, but yeah, I do believe the concept of artificial intelligence or virtual reality would not replace anything in our life, because this is just like the concept of computer in our third industrial revolution, and I think AI or virtual reality would be the fourth one in humans history. And if we can use this kind of tools, I mean, in a method, in a project collected wisdom, I think this kind of tools can help us to do all kinds of tasks better. Yeah, instead of just replace some of us. Yeah, that is my belief. And I think I have the belief that everyone over here will agree with me. Is it? Yeah.
And I hope Ron, Bob, and Tom, you all agree with me. She's ready to become a professor somewhere.
I would think so.
Yeah, but there are people out there whose whole purpose in life is to disrupt, and that's how they make a living.
For sure.
And Tom, go ahead, Jill.
No, because at the beginning of the searching period, I think, because originally I would like to conduct a research to see if AI or this generative AI would lower people's or students' cognition levels. And probably this is some kind of concern teacher may use AI in the classroom, only in educational setting. So that's what I mean. I totally agree the concept of design-based approach, because this is the core of either in the educational setting or in our daily life. That's because you have to see why you have to use this kind of tools to teach your students, or why you have to use this kind of tool in our life instead of replace our or decrease or lower our cognition levels. So I totally agree with the key concept that repeatedly mentioned in today's lectures. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Esther has a comment, I think. Esther, you want to unmute and just help us out there?
I was just wondering, maybe someone can talk about it. And I think Jill has just mentioned a little bit of it. I wonder if AIs are going to replace the thought process of researchers. The deep thought process of humans. I am saying this because I see that a lot with my students, but I also see it with myself. When I want to think about something, the first thing I'll say, oh, let me see what ChatGPT says, or what does Bard say about it? Someone has just commented on elicit.com. I use a lot of that, and Perplexity. And I don't know if it's a pro, I would look at it as a con, because I don't get to think deeply, because it looks like it gets ideas for me, and I'm just building onto those ideas. So somehow it makes me think, will I lose my thinking, like my deep thought of knowledge and coming up with my own ideas? Thank you.
That's the final student question for tonight. Bob, Ron, you have any, or Tom, you have any comment there? Are we losing our intelligence?
Yeah, well, I could comment on that, and I think the short answer is yes, but it's changing. The classic example in math, of course, was the introduction of calculators and calculating the square root by hand. Probably no one in this group would know how to do that anymore. Maybe Bob does. I don't know, or Tom.
No.
Not like, probably don't remember that. But it's the same kind of skill. The skills we need are going to be changing. We're going to be using AI, as I said before, to augment. It's going to supplement our thinking. It's going to boost our thinking. It's going to do brainstorming for us. I was saying it's going to, it does now. So we're not going to really need to develop those skills quite as much as before. But our new skills are going to be judging and assessing. Is what ChatGPT, for instance, putting out accurate? Does it make sense? Is it logical? Are those references, like Bob mentioned, are they valid references? That's going to be our skill more. We're going to be developing those skills, critical thinking skills. Maybe not so much creative skills as it's really.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ron. I think it would have been very easy for me to take that response that I got with from version 3.5 and share that. And you know, I think it takes someone to say, wait, you know, I'm not totally comfortable without going further and checking sources and kind of playing out the arguments and to be critical users of AI. I think, and that requires a set of skills, as you point out.
And we will be using it. All of you will be using it absolutely in your professional lives going forward. You're using it now if you're a student, and going forward, you're going to be using it more and more. And I think our skills, the skills that we need, will change as a result.
But I'm not getting the chip in my brain. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, well, I just want to say, you asked for a recommendation, and I posted one, Genius Makers by Cade Metz. Not a well-known book, but Cade is a writer for the New York Times. And he produced a very, very readable book about the origins of generative AI. And my previous heroes, many decades ago, Seymour Papert and Marvin Minsky, they actually held back the whole generative AI movement, feeling that machines could never learn on their own. They had to be programmed and given rules for every single step that they would carry out. They didn't think that machines could come up with new ideas, create something new, new thoughts, new ideas, new text from previous text. So it's a very, very fascinating read up until the very early days of OpenAI and ChatGPT getting going. So
I'll put that in the list for tonight's students. Put it in there.
Highly recommend it. I'm not sure about I have a hardcover copy, one of the few, Bob. And hardcover, but it may be available at ebook as well. Amazon, definitely. It's there.
Can you hold it up again? Hold it up for us.
Just get it in focus here. Genius Makers. Genius Makers, the Mavericks who brought AI, Google, and Facebook to the world. And it's fascinating. A lot of it focuses around Geoffrey Hinton, the University of Toronto, considered the godfather of modern deep learning, and
who does believe in the AI apocalypse.
Yeah, that's right. Because what's fascinating about it is the author brings in the personal side. Geoffrey Hinton, for instance, had a disability from his early days where he couldn't sit. He had to either stand or lie down because of a physical problem. And the early days, Google wanted him to go over to the deep learning group in London, and he said he couldn't go because he can't sit in an airplane. So they chartered a jet with a bed in it so he could fly by him over there. Described him sitting with his graduate students in Las Vegas, waiting for bids from Google, Facebook, and Microsoft to get his team to move. And he finally cut it off at 45 million or something. Okay, we'll go to Google for 45 million. So he brings in that side as well as how the AI winters and what happened, why they happened, and it's very fascinating. I highly recommend it.
Funny, the people in Turkmenistan who invited me and didn't get me a personal plane when I told them I have a back issue last week. They said, no private plane for you. Maybe Dr. Owston weekend. So the three of you, as a final, Tom, did you have a comment on what the brain impact on cognition or?
Nothing that I could add beyond what these great gentlemen have said. So, by the way, the book Genius Makers is on sale today for $4.99.
Wow!
Oh my gosh!
Hey, there we go.
Go
How about
for it.
Audible? How about Audible, Tom? Does it have? Does it?
It has an Audible version too.
Okay, all for $4.
Definitely go for it. If you could have it in your car playing, yeah, absolutely. And when you're flying somewhere, absolutely, it's very readable.
So I hate to do this to you guys. I would like you to make a final comment, maybe about the future, where we're going. And while each of you maybe make a 1-minute final comment, each of you, if the students in here, others could type in the chat your appreciation for our guests tonight. Just maybe 3 words, 4 words, 5 words, but let's hear from all 3 of them, and then we'll get a picture of everybody before we go. So who would like to start with a comment or on the future or comment on tonight? Bob, Tom, maybe we should end with Bob since he was the invited guest for tonight. We should start with Ron or Tom here.
Yeah, I'll just say that I always love it when Kurt texts me and says, "Ooh, I've got a great guest in for my class tonight. Do you want to sit in?" And so when I saw it was Bob, there was no way I was going to miss it. So I'm so glad I did. I always learn so much and really appreciate
thank you.
And just thrilled by all the young people you got here as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I feel very much the same, and Bob and Tom and Bob. Certainly, Bob, I haven't connected with you for quite a while, and it's been terrific to meet up. And Kurt, you're the person, the glue that gets everybody together. Without you,
right.
Elmer's
yeah,
glue.
This was a real surprise and a real delight. I was expecting to carry the load here, but to have these guys and you, Kurt, this was really a lot of fun. I enjoyed this very much, and it was great connecting to Ron and Tom, and of course you again, Kurt, and it was very delightful. Thank you.
Well, they're going to let me do this next year, both face-to-face and online, 2 sections. So maybe we can have part 2 on this next spring, if I remember all. But yeah, so very impressive. Lena says very creative discussions and so forth. Bo's coming in. Thanking you, Elise, as well. Esther, everyone has enjoyed tonight's session. As you can see, I did. It's recorded. I'll make this available for you all in a day or so. But thank you, Bob. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Tom. I wish you could be there in person to shake your hands or to buy you a beer or to just chat on your porch. We should meet up in Reno sometime or in San Francisco, or in Rome, Georgia, or on Ron's boat on the Great Lakes, so thank you. So I get a picture of everyone. Hold your hands up and do the world is open sign. I'll snap the shot here. 1, 2, 3, smile. Great, thank you very much. Okay, wow. I'm going to stop the recording at this point. This is week 5. I didn't stop. Let's keep going. Stop the recording. Week 5, R678 with Bob Kozma, with Tom Reeves, with Ron Owston, with Bo, with my students, Yo Yanzi, with others from around the world, Jill and Lena and Sung Hee. Thank you very much for tonight.